Hey guys, Josh here, and in this video I'll be sharing with you my thoughts on Bandle Tale, a League of Legends story, which is a cozy crafting RPG published by Riot Games, the team behind the League of Legends franchise, and developed by Lazy Bear Games, who made Graveyard Keeper. It released on February 21st, 2024 for the Nintendo Switch and Steam, and I was provided with an early Switch copy for this review. I played it for about 30 hours. I'm not entirely done with the game, so this is more of my first thoughts than a full review, but as always, I'll try to go in depth as much as possible to give you a clear idea of what the game is like, tell you what I liked and disliked about it, and hopefully by the end of the video, you should know whether or not this one is for you. The first thing you'll do in Bandle Tale is create your character, and you play as a Yordle, which are these very cute creatures who built Bandle City, where the game takes place. The character creation is fairly simple. You choose your name, you pick between a few different hairstyles, ears, and colors for each part of your body. Nothing too complicated, just enough to make your character look a bit unique, and you can also customize it at any point later in game, so you don't have to overthink it and you can jump into the story pretty quickly. You grew up in the outskirts of Bandle City in a place called Yarnville, spending most of your days learning how to knit from your grandpa and hanging out with your best friend Clover. Until one day you're invited to a party, something bad happens, and Bandle City is thrown into chaos. Bridges that were previously connecting the different parts of town are all destroyed, separating everyone and disrupting their quiet lives. Your goal is then to find out what happened exactly and to work with the other Yordles in each of the different neighborhoods in order to reunite Bandle City. If you're familiar with League of Legends, you will recognize some characters. I'm sure there's probably going to be a few places, items, or things that you'll see and be like, oh my gosh, I know that, and it will be fun to revisit that universe in a completely different game. But personally, I don't know anything about League of Legends, so it was all brand new to me, yet I didn't feel like I was really missing out on anything. Sometimes this can be tricky with a spin-off of a well-established franchise, but you can tell that Bandle Tale was developed for both fans of League of Legends as well as newcomers, and it's a game that can stand on its own. I found the story interesting at first. I'm sure it would have been even more exciting if I recognized the characters, but around the 15 to 20 hour mark, I will admit I started losing interest into what was happening. Fortunately, even though it is a bit more story-driven than most crafting games, it never felt like the dialogues went on for too long, so it was not too much of a problem, like they would for example in Eastward Octopia, but they also did not manage to keep me fully captivated. Visually, the game looks great, the pixel art is very detailed, and they managed to make everything look so whimsical, giving the world a very unique charm. Each area has its own color palette and style, as well as of course resources and characters, and it is a pleasure to look at and explore new places. The only issue I had, and I'll talk a bit more about this once we get to the gameplay, but I kept getting lost. The world, as I said, is very whimsical, but often I felt like the aesthetics took over practicality. There were lots of little paths everywhere going in all directions, up and down, left and right, with tons of bridges, small nooks and crannies, and it is hard to describe with words. Maybe you can feel it by watching the footage, but even after multiple hours, I kept going the wrong way while trying to go home or meet with an NPC. There is a map that you can consult, and I was really grateful for it. I used it a lot during my playthrough, but the world is built in a way that is not very intuitive. It's really great to look at, don't get me wrong, but not great to navigate, especially in a game where there is a lot of going back and forth between areas. In terms of performance, I played the Switch version for this review, and I'm curious to know if it does the same thing on PC, but I felt like there was a bit of stuttering while walking around. I don't know if it's just due to the wobbly walking animation of the Yordle, which is really cute, or something else, but I wish the game felt a bit smoother. It was especially jarring at first when I started playing, but I got used to it, so I don't notice it as much now, and overall, I'm still glad that I picked up the Switch version, as I feel like this game looks better in handheld. I usually play with my Switch docked most of the time, but for this game specifically, I felt compelled to play in handheld mainly, as it felt similar to, let's say, if you play a GBA game on an actual GBA, compared to like an emulator on a big screen. The pixel art looked a lot crisper and neater on the small screen, and you can also save at any time, which makes Bandle Tale a good game to play in short sessions no matter where you are. Even in handheld, the menus look good and intuitive. They reminded me of Graveyard Keeper a bit, which makes sense since it was made by the same team and both games feel similar in many ways. And I know Graveyard Keeper had some issues with the font being a bit too small. However, reading and navigating the menus in Bandle Tale felt pretty good, so it looks like the developers have learned from their mistakes for that. The only nitpick I have is that the left stick felt slightly too sensitive, with the smallest touch moving over multiple squares in the inventory, so I often had to use the D-pad in the menus, otherwise I would struggle to select specific items. While we're talking about the menus, I also want to point out that the game has 3 different colorblind modes, and I can't really comment on them as I'm not colorblind, but it is nice to see this accessibility option being added to more games in the last few years. Other than that, there are not too many settings or accessibility features, such as an option to remap buttons, which could have been nice to see. Now, let's go over what it's like to actually play this game. You will be asked to complete different quests, most of them requiring you to provide specific items. You gather resources by holding down the A button. Some of them require you to have a tool equipped, but most resources can be obtained by hand. There's no stamina, energy, health, or anything like that to worry about, so gathering is very simple. The only stat to keep track of is your emotion, these purple orbs that fill up as you collect and craft items. When you go to bed, which can be done at any time, there is a day and night cycle, but it's purely visual. These purple orbs will convert into skill points that can then be spent in the skill trees. These skill trees strongly reminded me of Graveyard Keeper once again, as you have different categories such as knitting, engineering, nature, and magic. It is a bit simplified as there's only one type of skill point in Bandle Tale as opposed to 3 in Graveyard Keeper, and most skills are locked behind badges that are obtained by doing quests. Quests will also tell you what skills are necessary in order to complete them, so even though the trees can seem overwhelming at first, they follow the story pretty closely and I always had a good idea of what to get next. At first, crafting is fairly simple, you have a few different machines in your house. There are also a few fixed ones out in the world. You put your items in there and you're good to go. However, as you progress in the skill trees, things do get a bit more tricky. Not only will you be able to gather new materials and make new machines, but you will start noticing that a lot of recipes require auras. Auras are these properties that can be applied to a tile in or outside your home, such as motion, precision, heat, growth, harmony, and more. So you will need your machines to be on a tile with the correct aura in order to make certain items. This is where one of the main features of Bandle Tale comes in, the ability to move your house around. While you can eventually make your own auras using various machines, which sometimes also need to be powered with even more auras, the easiest way to get auras is to bring your house to a place where you'll find them on the ground. Each part of Bandle City has 2 or 3 predetermined spots where you can place your house, and your house is actually a giant backpack. Interact with it, pick it up, go to the new place, put it down, and it all sounds very convenient, but this is where the game really lost me. Not only do you need to do this extremely often, but as I said near the beginning of the video, the world is not the most pleasant to navigate. You can unlock different legs that will make you sprint faster, but the amount of going back and forth between different spots just to craft an item for a quest gets tedious very fast, especially with the convoluted layout of the world. There is a fast travel system. It costs a few pieces of portal yarn, which isn't too bad to make, but because of that, it also made me not use it as often as if it was free. The worst part, however, is that you cannot fast travel if you're not currently carrying your house. So for example, if you put your house down somewhere, then you go out to a different area to gather some resources, well, you won't be able to fast travel back home. It was so frustrating the amount of times I just wanted to fast travel, but I couldn't just because I already put my house down somewhere or I forgot to pick it up. As I played more, I got into the habit of always carrying my house with me, but that felt pretty tedious. It might be because I'm used to games where you just have one house in one spot for the whole game, or even games like Harvest Moon, The Winds of Vanthos, where you can move it around, but there is a convenient fast travel system and the house is moved easily. However, moving the house in Bandle Tale was such a pain and it had to be done so often. On a brighter note, the interior of your house stays pretty much unchanged no matter where you place it, and you can also modify the theme and color of your walls and furniture, so it's nice to have a little bit of customization. As for the exterior of your house or your backpack, you have different carpets that can be unrolled. One carpet has a vending machine, one is a festival plaza, one is for crafting, and one is a food stand. The vending machine can be filled with items that will get sold over time, and in return, you'll get stars, which are the currency used to buy items from NPCs, and most items you sell will also fill up the orders meter. Each area of Bandle City has 3 meters, satisfaction in pink, friendship, I think, in blue, and orders in green. Once you have enough orders, you can set up the food stand where you'll get as many customers as there are in your orders meter. Customers will come in and you'll have to serve them the dish they requested by putting the ingredients in the proper stations, for example to bake or to crush them, and then you'll just serve them to the customers. This is fun, each order has a time limit, but it's pretty easy and simple, and you get rewarded with more stars, and the better you do, the more you'll fill up the pink and blue meters. Once that's done, you can then unroll the festival carpet and pick an event to host. Each event will have its own requirement of vibes, sound, and visual points that can be achieved by placing down furniture on the carpet. For example, one festival might require between 0 and 3 vibe points, so you have to avoid putting too many of these items, but 12 sound points, so you have to find a way to have a lot of these in a limited space. This will require you to rearrange things often and can sometimes feel like a puzzle since items can only be placed in specific spots. You then choose your guest, which will cost points from the pink and blue meters that you filled up previously, and start the event. Guests will stand around the furniture during the party and will get these yellow orbs over their head that you'll have to grab quickly and put in the big yellow orb that's on the side of your house. A successful party will reward you with special items and more skill points so you can progress faster in the skill trees. I do like the idea of having different carpets, each with their own function, and I like how they connect with each other. So you have to do the vending, which helps you for the food stand, then the festival, and of course you have the one carpet for crafting, but unfortunately none of these steps is really that engaging, so it gets very repetitive quickly, especially when the game asks you to throw a festival in each part of town one after the other. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all carpets can be unrolled in all areas. So for example, some areas may have an obstacle preventing you to open the food stand, meaning that you'll have to move your house somewhere else if you want to serve food, but then you may have to come back right after in order to host the festival. I can see that they wanted for each house location to have its own pros and cons, giving the game maybe a bit of a puzzle vibe, but it ends up just not being that fun of a mechanic, and once again, it feels tedious. Besides moving your house over and over again, plus doing the food stand and festivals, most of your time will be spent gathering materials and crafting. This is of course just a matter of personal preference, but I like when crafting games give you other activities to do as well. For example, in my time at Sandrock, yes, there is a ton of crafting required, but you can also explore dungeons and fight enemies, you can make friends with the other characters, you can participate in actual festivals, you have a few different minigames, and if you're bored of crafting, there's always something to change things up. However, Bandle Tale feels extremely one-dimensional, and if you don't like the idea of crafting all the time, it won't be a game for you. Also, whether you're gathering crops, ores, or mushrooms, it's all done pretty much the same way. The only thing that is slightly different is the fishing, which is an extremely quick and easy version of the Stardew Valley fishing mechanic. With a series as popular as League of Legends, I was honestly expecting Bandle Tale to offer a bit more variety. I kept pushing through to see if things would change a bit as I enjoyed the presentation and universe, but I kind of had to force myself to get to 30 hours because the gameplay loop just felt not as engaging as other crafting games currently available. To conclude, Bandle Tale is a game with a nice atmosphere that can keep you busy for a while if you don't get tired of the non-stop crafting and moving your house around. I liked it for the first few hours. It's not necessarily a bad game, and it does present a few interesting ideas like moving your house and different carpets for things like a food stand and hosting your own festivals, but unfortunately, everything is done in a way that feels so tedious and formulaic. It could be a good pick if it goes on sale, and if you don't mind the flaws that I mentioned in the video, if you just want a game with crafting, or if you're maybe a fan of League of Legends and really want to see your favorite champions in a spin-off game. But for me right now, it is hard to recommend, which is sad because I really wanted to love this game. So let me know what you think. Have you played Bandle Tale? Did you like it or not? Tell me in the comments, leave a like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.